The hallway itself was frightening. Between the two main buildings connected by a library at my seminary, if you crossed from one building to the other, you had to use a hallway that had a door to a special learning center flanked by a portrait. The portrait was of Jonathan Edwards, and the center was entirely devoted to his life and work. If you don't know who Jonathan Edwards is, you're in the right place. And if you do, you're really in the right place. In the last few decades, there has been a lot of renewed interest in Edwards because he created a wholesale revolution in colonial religion. His ministry, both his writing and his preaching, sparked the first honest-to-God revival in religion in the colonies in the middle of the 18th century. Today, people call it the Great Awakening. Edwards is credited with taking the dominant form of Puritan, reserved, subdued forms of worship into a new expression of worship that was more outwardly emotive than any pilgrim or buttoned-up Puritan ever could have imagined. But this renewed attention, it's not coming from Unitarian Universalists. It's not coming even from Congregationalists who were sort of his people, cousins in the family tree. He's getting a lot of attention because he's the great-grandparent of the evangelical movement in America. Because he also successfully intertwined his religious leadership with political governance and power. Through family ties, through purchases, through all kinds of means, he did this. So any wannabe religious theocrat today really wants to be Jonathan Edwards, even if they don't know it. And who can blame them? His sermon, entitled "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," is still thought by many to be the single most influential sermon in American religious history, even though you might confuse it for the name of a death metal band. Oh, his sermons scared people, friends. But they also moved people, literally. Oh yeah. Reports of the effects of Edwards' preaching on people included passionate fainting, swooning, the undulations of the body. He wielded the wages of sin like a choir conductor and tuned his congregations to a fever pitch. But his style and sensational preaching took a dark turn. Congregants became so moved and so convinced of the futility of their lives, they actually started to end their own lives, including an uncle of Edwards himself. This tragic turn of events, many historians agree, was what put an end to the Great Awakening and sent Edwards and his followers back to a more contemplative, less sensational form of worship. It was a troubling and tragic turn in the colonial religion. So, passing by that door, that place where scholars would study his work, on my way to Unitarian Universalist practice and theology, was a bit of a strange place to be, like an alternate dimension. I mean, the hallway itself was frightening. Now, would you like me to sum up 27 volumes of books, sermons, essays and talks that Edwards generated in his life? Would you want me to do that? Okay. Sinning is easy. Talking about it ain't. That's it. See, this series of sermons through this Lenten season examines words we hear in religious settings, examines those words and mines them for their histories, for what we can make of them in our own lives, redeeming words. And though we ministers here don't technically draw straws at First Unitarian on who's going to preach on what, if there were a short straw to draw, it would have the word sin written right on it. So let's start with what sin really means, this little word. It shouldn't surprise anyone that this tiny little word, not even a wordle, with these 3 common letters in it, is not suited for simple explanation of origin and meaning. Some say that the Greek root shares a meaning with to cause separation, which makes sense. Others say more practical schools of thought find a meaning in words from romantic languages that mean absence or withoutness. Sans, if you studied French. Sin, if you studied Spanish. Without. Interestingly, in Latin, some believe it shares a root with sooth, which Shakespeare used a lot for the word truth. But, okay, Libby. Personally, what I like about the word is that as a Greek prefix, it means all of us together. Like synonym, or synagogue, or symphony. In other languages, it has an N. It's hard not to notice the similarity of the word also sing, which originally was only ever a collective verb. I bet you didn't know that. Only recently was it used for a solo singer. Now, my little nerdy heart would love to go on, but the boredom you're all feeling right now, it betrays a fundamental problem with pinning down the meaning of the word. It's so small and so similar to so many other words that tracing its real history and original meaning with any certainty is impossible. And maybe that shouldn't be a surprise, because after all, Edwards, an expert on the subject, tells us what? Sinning is easy. Talking about it ain't. My first real tangible brush with sin came in song, as so many things often do. Now the Lord saw some sinning, and it gave him pain. And he said, "Stand back, I'm gonna make it rain. So hey, brother Noah, I tell you what to do. Build me a floating zoo and get some of them green..." No, we won't do that. Oh, I got you. This venerable text, penned by Shel Silverstein, he was getting banned before getting banned was cool, and sung by the Clancy brothers, points to an understanding of sin mostly out of the Hebrew scriptures. And that understanding goes more like this: sinning is easy, and it takes a village. See, the concept of original sin, which flows from the first actions of disobedience, heaven forbid, literally, by 2 humans, when Adam took a bite of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, is spun now into all kinds of beliefs about the depravity of people. In our own faith, the Unitarian strand of our forebears rejected the notion of any original sin for all humans. And our Universalist heritage makes clear that since there's no supernatural hell, sinning is less about what happens in the afterlife and what we do about it in this life. All right? Now, many theologians believe that humanity's original sin is sexism, is misogyny, that is what Genesis is about. And America's original sins are slavery and our treatment of the people of the First Nations of this soil. Right. And what do these sins need to be committed? Commitment to the idea of difference. Because you need difference. You need separation to practice indifference to the suffering of others. Right. Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great Jewish theologian who took part in the march on Selma, said, "It is a burning sin to remain indifferent." The pernicious belief that I am different fundamentally from someone else is the root of virtually every wrong humans commit, because it's a fiction. It's a lie. Ask any biologist how much genetic information humans of all gender expressions share. Ask any particle physicist, if you don't like biologists, about how similar the foundations of life itself are among an array of species. Same, fundamentally. That is why differences we express are so exciting. So much of us is so exactly the same as one another that seeing and appreciating the differences is what makes us desire one another, fall in love with one another, be friends with one another, build communities that are stronger and stronger and stronger. That is why I like thinking of sin as that prefix, the meaning that we start with, that we are all in this together collectively first and foremost. That is why sin present today in society is mostly the exploitation of the beautiful, the rare variations of those expressions. To locate a small variation and hold it up as something enormous, requiring a raft of othering, of penalizing, of dangerous ideas, of rules or laws. After all, sinning is easy. Just ask the legislature. Shakespeare tells us, in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy. And that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. Yeah, there's not a lot of salvation in justice right now. Many of you know the Texas legislature has received all the bills it's going to get for about 2 years now. And among them are bills trying to restrict access to drag performances. In one proposed bill, there's a move to reclassify any place with a drag performance that also distributes in any way any alcoholic beverage to be a sexually oriented business under the Texas business statutes. Now, I know drag shows are not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. But in the proposed bill, there's a definition of drag performance. You want to hear it? Okay. Drag performance means a performance in which a performer exhibits a gender identity that is different than the performer's gender assigned at birth, using clothing, makeup, or other physical markers, and sings, lip syncs, I like that, dances, or otherwise performs before an audience for entertainment. But that's a pretty new definition. There's a much older one, D-R-A-G. D-R, dressed, A, as, G, girl. Drag was an acronym written in the margins of what? Anyone? That's right. Shakespeare's manuscripts. Because women were not even allowed to act in plays in Elizabethan England. The soliloquy we heard was a reading by a female character, Portia, who would have had to have been played by what? A man. And in that scene, for you Shakespeare buffs out there, or just you nerds or lovers of irony, Portia is dressed up as what? A man. Yeah. And the entire soliloquy is about the danger of permitting the letter of the law to be worshiped and deified beyond the spirit, the very human spirit of the law. And some legislators might want to take note, because if these laws pass, then under Texas law, a law that uses the term drag, coined by Shakespeare himself, most of Shakespeare's plays could only be performed at sexually oriented businesses. Now, I think Shakespeare would kind of dig that. I could just hear it. Let's hear it for Shangela, ladies and gentlemen. Next up, the Royal Shakespeare Company with Act 4, Scene 1 from Merchant of Venice. Don't forget to tip the performers. I share this not to anger you, friends, not even to delight you or send you into some stupor over stupidity, but to show that even in what we perceive as difference, as something wildly dissimilar at times, there is more in common between two ideas than we might even see. One of the central figures of the canon of drama would be banned from theaters should these laws pass, and that would be a sin. Now, whenever I think of sin, I still can't erase from my mind that spooky portal in my seminary hallway with the famous painting of Edwards out in front. He gestures into the air forcefully, with authority, like this. He might be holding those sinners in the hands of his own, or like he's pointing heavenward. It's hard to tell, but it is striking. He's outside in what looks like a public square, on a stage in front of hundreds of people. Passers-by would certainly see him, including children. His long robe, a lot like this one, goes almost to the floor. You can see his billowing, bouncy sleeves. You can imagine them blowing in the crisp air. He's crowned with beautiful, flowing hair. It looks like a wig. It must have been styled with curlers or something to get it to look like that. And it was probably powdered with just a little makeup to get it, it was the style then. Oh, and the people watching him in his billowing gown. Oh, and finely coiffed and powdered wig. Oh, those people were moving and swaying passionately to the words and saying them along with him. They're undulating, they're fainting. Now, I'm not saying it's a drag show. But if the sensible patent leather heel with little brass buckles fit, then wear it, girl. The most influential theologian in the Calvinist tradition after Edwards was Karl Barth. Barth said that much of theology isn't actually talk of God. It's just humans proclaiming themselves louder and louder and louder. And friends, the more I am alive, the more I see the world, and the more I see coming from those who seek, who cling to, who want power, it convinces me that we are not sinners in the hands of an angry God. We are in the hands of angry sinners playing God. One of my favorite authors about God says this: "You are not your clothes. You are not your profession. You are not your religion. You are an extension of the consciousness that guides the universe, for which there is no name because it cannot be defined. That's why all superficial things you list as your identity are in reality your drag. Years ago, when I heard someone say, "We are all God in drag," I knew it to be true at my core. That's from RuPaul Charles' most recent book. And if you never thought you'd hear RuPaul and Karl Barth and Jonathan Edwards in the same sermon, welcome home. Now everybody say love. Love. No, everybody say love. Love. That's right. That's how RuPaul begins a lot of her public appearances, leading with love. And friends, it's easy to get dragged down in the fights, into the name-calling, into deciding who is right and who is righteous. But when we get dragged into that fight, it's only giving into that false belief of division. It's only going to take down the dark and scary hallways of my mind where I start comparing revivalist colonial preachers to drag queens. And looking back now, I kind of feel bad about that. Because no one should insult a drag queen like that. Everybody say love. You know that those who deal in fear and peddle their terror at indifference, who seek the fervent power of a bygone era and a dangerous theology, you know what they're really afraid of, right? Everybody say love. Love. You know what conquers the only real sins there are, the sins of false separation and pitting people against people across lines of gender, race, ethnicity, class, and creed. Say it loud. And get used to shouting it loud, friends, because in love, in real love, the pain of our siblings is our pain. The threats to freedom and dignity of our beloveds are threats to the freedom and the dignity of us all. Let not the quality of mercy be strained. If they drag you down, drag yourself up again. And keep loving across false divides, keep loving across false distance, keep loving and loving and loving until indifference is no more, till it is scattered from the face of this earth. I say this now to all those who feel alone, who think there is no church for them, who worry where they might go to be seen and to be loved in this world that seems divided. This church is here for you. Everybody say love. Because what is the doctrine of this church? Love. And may it ever be so. Blessed be and amen.